In 1820, a 14-year-old boy named Joseph Smith claimed that he'd talked to God and Jesus Christ. Whether he was a myth-maker of genius or a true prophet, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which he founded, is today one of the fastest-growing religions in America, with 10 million members worldwide and assets in excess of $30 billion. Early Mormon history is a catalogue of persecution, torment, and suffering, tempered by discipline, endurance, and faith. In 1844, Joseph Smith, their president and prophet, was arrested and subsequently murdered by an angry mob. His successor, Brigham Young, like Moses, was to lead the Latter-day Saints out of Gentile persecution to Zion. The Mormon trail they created to Salt Lake City has become the centerpiece of Mormon mythology. To mark the 150th anniversary of that heroic journey west, Mormons and Gentiles, cowboys and dignitaries have jetted in from every corner of the globe to reenact that journey. Wagon train reenactments happen regularly in America, but this is the biggest in 100 years. Mormons make up 3/4 of this wagon train, and for them, it's more of a spiritual journey than a physical one. Many can trace their ancestors right back to the original pioneers.
I've known I was about as Mormon as you could get. I have 14 of my 16 great-grandparents crossed the plains, and I have 21 direct ancestors that walked across, and none of them died.
Some people are doing it for spiritual reasons here on the train, and you know, we hope that we get fulfilled spiritually too and feel the spirit of the pioneers and the spirit of what they did.
I found that there were 50 of my ancestors who started west, and 6 of them are buried somewhere on the plains, not in marked graves anywhere. But so it is personal for me, but that's not, I guess, my purpose in coming. But it is real for me that way.
Since this is a mainly greenhorn train, the Mormons have recruited some experienced professionals and some part-time cowboys to guide them along the 1,100-mile trail.
I'm in the appliance business. I handle the appliance for the Mrs. Jones out there, the lady that comes in and needs the washer, the dryer, the refrigerator, the microwave oven, sales and service. And this is a release for me to get away from the daily grind and get out into the daily grit.
I'm a heathen. I'm one of those Gentiles, as they call them. But you know, if it hadn't been for the Gentiles, the pioneers would have never made it. These pilgrims would have never made it across these plains. Yeah. It was the Gentiles that led them to begin with and got them trained to where they could make it.
The Mormon Church has always been a missionary church.
Hey, please, give me the mini tour. Please, give me the...
Okay, one thing.
So at the start of the journey, what it lacks in trail experience, it makes up for in merchandising. The motto for this trek is faith in every footstep, and there could be no more appropriate legend for the 2 English pilgrims on the trail. They've traveled here together to pay tribute to those early English converts who'd crossed the Atlantic and walked all the way to Salt Lake City in the 1850s.
I've come to appreciate tremendously what they did achieve, really have. And I've spent a great deal of time thinking about them and their achievement, and thinking about my family and what they're doing and how long I'm away from them. But I know it's all going to end, you know. I know the date it's going to end. I know they'll still be there, and England will be still as beautiful when I get back. But they were never going back.
I'm here for a purpose,
You know, that purpose, as I've mentioned before, is to represent the early saints from our country who left our country, emigrated to America as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and came here in order to worship God according to the dictates of their own conscience. I am determined that I'm going to the valley. That's what I've set out to do, and nothing's going to deter me from actually doing that.
Brigham Young had been commanded by God and the prophet to lead the saints to freedom, to go west, and to find the promised land. The reenactment wagon train departed like the tribe of Israel it believed itself to be. 25 wagons, half a dozen handcarts, 400 people and all their support vehicles, headed for Salt Lake City and Zion. Despite being persecuted, beaten, murdered, and finally driven out of 2 U.S. states, despite the assassination of the prophet Joseph Smith, by 1847, the Latter-day Saints embraced a swelling congregation of over 30,000 souls, fueled by missionary zeal and seemingly unlimited reserves of courage and faith. Inspired by that tradition, Gordon has already decided that he's not going to ride on a wagon, he's going to walk all the way.
I had a particular affinity for those who travelled with the handcarts, because I felt in some way that I was representing, you know, the poor, the destitute, who could not afford the wagons or the horses. And so they had to make themselves handcarts and pull and push them with all their worldly possessions loaded on here.
Having made a 3-month passage across the Atlantic, it was a true test of faith to face an 1,100-mile trek to Zion on foot. However, when Brigham Young's first Mormon wagon train of 1847 entered into Indian country, there were no handcarts. It included 144 men and boys, only 3 women and 2 children. There were 72 wagons, one of which pulled a cannon in case of attack, 93 horses, 52 mules, 66 oxen, 19 cows, 17 dogs, and some chickens. These modern-day pilgrims will follow as close as possible to that original Mormon trail, which in Nebraska follows the line of the North Platte River. 500 miles of flatlands, once populated by herds of wild buffalo, and home to the Cheyenne, Pawnee, and Potomac tribes. On this first day, the route is mostly on highway and private gravel roads, and there's little likelihood of attack. The sun didn't shine on this new tribe of Israel all day, but spirits were high as the train pulled into the first camp on rolling grassland at the mouth of the Platte River Valley. Horseboxes, motorhomes, and powerful 4-wheel drives outnumber the handcarts and wagons by 2 to 1, so it's not quite the archetypal American dream. This is mainly a greenhorn train, and their inexperience is already displaying symptoms.
Your horse has colic! He watered him too quick. He watered him too quick. Oh, he's going to go down. Look out, Ryan. Ryan! Your horse has a tummy ache. Our horse gets it too. That's why we didn't water them when they're hot. When you water them when they're hot, they get a tummy ache and have colic, and you need to keep them up. You need to walk them around. They can die. Yeah.
For the original pioneers, an unhealthy animal could mean the difference between life and death, and many never made it to the valley. Gordon doesn't have a horse, just a shared faith, a common goal, and British determination. But he too has a problem, and it's a big problem.
About 18 months ago, I had an operation for cancer, which left me with irreversible colostomy. And I had every intention to actually ride on a wagon because I felt I wasn't up to walking. It wasn't until I arrived in Omaha when I decided that I would walk and that I would carry the flag of my country, the Union Jack, and that I would walk all the way. And I knew it wasn't going to be without its challenges. It would involve some suffering.
Both Gordon and Pam are first-generation Mormon converts. They've learnt that the suffering and sacrifice of those early saints are an essential ingredient of the Mormon missionary message.
I won't tell you what I told the missionaries the first time they came. And we tore ribbons in their discussions because we were interested in them, we were interested in America, we had so many questions on the religion they were telling us that it wasn't very easy for them, but gradually they taught us what they wanted to, and then it was up to us, we could accept or reject it. But we liked what we heard, and so we joined the church, and that will be 30 years ago this September. And next to marrying my husband, it's the best decision I've ever made.
The horse with colic recovered completely, and there were no other casualties on the first day. On his first day in 1847, Brigham Young also had one casualty, Ellis Eames. He was a fiddle player for the dancers in the temple of Nauvoo. He fell sick and was spitting blood, and he returned home that night. But many thought him just weak in the faith. 150 years later, it's hard to imagine the emotions of that time. But the modern-day pilgrims are going to try. For the next 3 months, they'll rise at 5 in the morning and travel 20 to 30 miles in a day. And like their ancestors, they'll write journals documenting the trip. A snapshot in time of a spiritual adventure to the Promised Land. The Mormon pioneers were an organized army of God searching for the freedom to practice their faith. These modern-day pilgrims have not experienced suffering at the hands of mobs, being driven from their homes, or watched their children die of cold and starvation. And perhaps that's why they're here. The cowboys call it the Trail of Tears, and many were shed at unmarked graves across the North Platte Valley. For the next few weeks, the reenactment train pushed on without major incident. The Mormon story of migration to the West is a classic American tale. What sets it apart is spiritual, the exodus of an oppressed people searching for freedom and the Promised Land. This journey is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the Mormons to tell their own story to the whole world.
350,000 people crossed the plains in those decades in the last part of the 19th century. Many of them went to California, they went to Oregon, but they went looking for pasture land, you know, the black soil, or they went for California gold or for some other economic reason. The Mormon pioneers went for a completely different reason. They were looking for a place of refuge. And actually, they wanted to find somewhere that was so far away, so remote, and basically so unattractive, no one else would want it. In fact, Joseph Smith said that they wanted to find a place where the devil couldn't go and dig them out.
On the other side of this mountain really is reserved for the professional media.
Until quite recently, the Mormon Church had a history of bad press, fanned by secrecy and paranoia about its polygamous past.
You're in the middle of that team coming down, you can have a serious accident. So make sure you get far enough back and out of the way.
But the Public Affairs Department is trying to change all that. With the same missionary zeal which has established them on every continent in the world, they now embrace the media with all the confidence of a people with God on their side.
A dramatic reenactment by the Mormon Sesquicentennial Wagon Trek, tonight on the Eyewitness News.
Today's photo opportunity is as the train travels over some of the original sand dune ruts. It can be dangerous, so only a few wagons and handcarts have been selected to participate. And there seem to be as many cameras as pilgrims, all looking for that classic shot.
Now they did very well. The big whites almost tipped their wagon. Now here comes the next wagon. You see it's already starting to tip because they're not keeping their left front wheel high enough. Wow, what a job.
For 500 miles, the trail across Nebraska runs parallel to the Union Pacific Railway. So the daily routine is reinforced by a mile-long goods train every 15 minutes. And save for a few sunny days, the weather across Nebraska has been miserable and cold.
This is good English weather. I feel good. Makes me feel at home. It is tremendous.
It's a crazy weather, but it's cool and it's also fine, because if it's hot, it's much more better.
In between the potty stops, lunch breaks, and train hooters, Gordon sometimes finds it difficult to reflect upon the mission of his trek west.
The hardest part of the day when walking is really to possibly create my own thought bubble so that I can focus 110% on what I'm actually doing, which is putting one foot in front of the other, to try to exclude any sounds or intervention, anything that's going to take me away from that concentration.
Gabriel, clutching at the stone, he felt as if the whole dark world was turning upside down.
But then you have many, many thoughts digging deep down into my deepest part of my soul, because you've got a lot of time to do it in.
Blisters on top of blisters, infected toe, likely to lose a toenail, but we just have to keep walking. And so far, I have had to ride in a wagon a few days to just give them a rest. When this went septic, I couldn't stand 2 pairs of socks on it, never mind a pair of boots. But that's what the pioneers had to do. A lot of them walked barefoot. I couldn't do that. So hopefully I'll toughen up gradually and just keep walking.
They're not ready yet. It's not ready yet!
To be a modern-day pilgrim costs money. It even costs money to walk on the wagon train, and everybody has to sign a contract. The rules are the responsibility of a charitable company, Heritage Gateways Limited, specially set up for this reenactment trek. If you want to join up, it's $25 a day to ride in a wagon, $15 a day to ride along with your horse, and $7.50 a day to walk with the hand carts. Meals are an extra $15 per person per day.
Nobody's supposed to get meals unless they pay, and you're way, way behind on your payments. You owe. I hate to say what you are on meals.
Well, see, the thing is with the paper, with the agreement with the...
Delane St. John is a nurse who quit her hospital job in Salt Lake to make the long trek to honor her Mormon ancestors. Here with her kids, she thought that her contract included all their meals. But the organizers don't see it that way.
No, why would they give you a different contract than everybody else? Now, I'm sorry, I don't like to be this way, but it's just that, hey,
I gave up my job when I left the hospital because mine said the entire trek. We went down there to all the training, and that was all meals and expenses, and that was the only way that I could go. I spoke to Max Pitcher and spoke to Diana, and it was cleared through an executive board meeting.
But who signed the contract?
I don't know.
Delane refused to pay some $2,000 for her meals, so the company took legal action.
I was served papers last night by the sheriff, and he told me that myself and my children were not allowed to be within 1 mile of the wagon train. If I refused, that they would place my children in the custody of the state of Nebraska and separate them into homes, and that I would be put in jail. I was born and raised a member of the LDS Church, and I've always had a strong testimony of the church.
The Mormon Church demands obedience, the subjugation of the individual for the good of the group. "My people must be tried in all things," said Brigham Young, "that they may be prepared to receive the glory that I have for them, even the glory of Zion. And he that will not bear chastisement is not worthy of my kingdom." The Indians called it the teepee. The pioneers called it Chimney Rock, the principal milestone on the journey west. Its tower could be seen for over 40 miles, and it was considered by the pioneers the halfway point. There have been a number of minor accidents, but spirits are high and the train is on schedule. It's blistering sunshine today, and there are some painfully blistering feet. Still, Pam is out front, practicing her hymns.
Suddenly a light descended. We're up to 400 now, which is the furthest I've ever walked in my life. Up until then it was 200 last year when I did the coast to coast in Britain. O'er him fell, around him shone. So we're getting fitter and stronger, and the only thing is my feet don't seem to be toughening up. I'm still having foot problems.
The trek has been swelled by almost 400 extra pilgrims. Most have joined for a day. But as the handcart company approaches Scott's Bluff, Gordon Baharrell is not among them.
The last 3 days he's been walking with pain in the afternoon as a result of an operation he had 2 years ago. And on Thursday evening it didn't respond to his usual painkillers. It continued to get worse. So he was taken into the hospital in Scottsbluff, where they treated his pain and cleared the blockage. But that wasn't sufficient. On further investigation, they discovered other things that weren't right. And so he had surgery for an hour and a half Friday morning to put those things right. And although he's in a lot of pain at the moment, it will be a blessing in disguise, because he will be fitter than he's been for the last 2 years. He hopes to be out in about 5 days, and he is absolutely determined to walk the rest of the way.
So far, I've been walking at times, you know, in pain, and not because I'm a brave man at all, but I've really felt it a privilege to be able to feel something of the feelings, the highs and lows of the early pioneers, many of whom actually gave their lives for the gospel. I'm prepared to follow suit, but I somehow don't think that I'm going to be asked to give my life. But I'm quite prepared to. Sounds rather dramatic, but I know the church is true. I know the church is true. A wonderful experience, marvelous experience. So walking other people's footsteps is a privilege and a pleasure.
He's a very strong-willed man and is determined to get to Salt Lake. So I'm carrying his flag for him in his absence, because this too, he wants to go all the way to Salt Lake City.
Gordon was still in hospital when the wagon train moved out of Nebraska and into the state of Wyoming. Ahead lay 500 forbidding miles of wind-blown sagebrush prairie, where the temperature can drop from 100 degrees at noon to below freezing at night. Thousands of Mormons followed Brigham Young's expedition of 1847. Church missions abroad were so successful and produced so many poor immigrant converts from England and Scandinavia that church funds had all but run out. Brigham Young's plan was to have the new converts build handcarts, which were much cheaper than a wagon and team. In 1856, 3,000 pilgrims, divided into 10 handcart companies, set out on the trail. But 2 of the companies set out too late in the season. So by the time they were halfway across Wyoming, the terrible winter snows had already set in. Of the 900 men, women, and children, over 200 froze or starved to death. Although it had been a terrible miscalculation by the saints, nothing quite symbolizes the pain and suffering of the Mormon Trail as that disaster. Their faith and sacrifice has been an inspiration for those who followed and is etched in the history of the church forever. The reenactment wagon train slowly makes its way past trailside graves across the state of Wyoming. But its inspiration today is Gordon Baharrell.
I was in hospital 8 days, and I was lying there, realizing that the wagon train was moving further and further away from me each day. And so I felt that although I was on a reenactment, I was not reenacting the pain. The pain was real. Just after my operation, I received a blessing, and the blessing was that I would recover swiftly from the operation, and that the recovery would be miraculous, and that I would soon join the wagon train, and in particular the handcart company, and be walking with them very, very quickly.
Whether it was a miracle of surgery, or as the Mormons believed, a miracle from God, Gordon was back on the trail in 10 days.
When I was actually released from hospital, I could barely walk, maybe a few yards, and walk with a cane. The first day of attempting to walk, I staggered 3 miles. The following day, doubled it to 6, and then 11 miles. The following week, I walked 27 miles without pain. And that was 10 days after being released from hospital. And then the following day, 25 miles. And then I've been walking ever since, the full distances, whatever is required.
Wyoming, 17.5 million acres of prairie, so unpopulated that there are more antelope than people. A new wagon master will lead the pilgrims across this state. The wagon train he's inherited has all but doubled in size.
Right now we've got 45 wagons, 150 head of horses, and we've been running between 400 and 450 people all told on the wagon train. So that's, you know, you're strung out. When you got 45 wagons and all your outriders, why you're strung out quite a ways down the trail. I didn't anticipate all the sport vehicles and stuff, because everybody that's involved, it seems like every one of them got 2 or 3 or 4 vehicles. Well, you've got 2 separate wagon trains, you know, and it's hard to deal with.
150 years ago, Wyoming was Indian country, the Wild West, and you crossed it at your peril. Today, most of it comes under the jurisdiction of the Bureau of Land Management, which operates strict controls over the territory. Nowadays, you just can't hop in a wagon and rattle across these sagebrush plains without a government permit.
First of all, it's the biggest wagon train in 100 years. Second of all, we didn't even know and figure that we didn't sit down and think through that every person coming here might have a van, a truck, a horse trailer, a fifth wheel, a Winnebago, and I'm exaggerating slightly. And then when you have 300 people, you might have 600 vehicles. And we didn't think of that. There's been two movements every day. One, you move the wagons and the hand carts. Then number two, once they get into the next segment, then they all come back and then move all the vehicles. And so then you have the second camp that gets moved, and that's what the people sleep in. Now, 150 years ago, those wagons and those hand carts, that was their tent, and that was everything.
The Bureau was insistent that no vehicles would be allowed on the original trail. But the wagon train organizers couldn't understand how their little old train could possibly damage 100,000 square miles of prairie. Naturally, the Bureau had the answer.
You have topsoil in England. Here, there is no topsoil. And that what happens to the surface on these areas is that the wind will start and exaggerate any cut that is made in the landscape. If I were to take two vehicles one time and you run a straight line, that mark will still be there in 100 years.
The BLM had spoken. You could walk, ride, or pull a handcart, but no motor vehicles. The train had reached the Continental Divide, an imaginary line that now divides the U.S. into East and West. America had not been kind to the early Mormons, so they left it and headed west. Delane St. John is still heading west, just a mile behind the wagon train. Heritage Gateways, the company running the reenactment trek, seemed determined to get their money and get her off the train, and they'd served her with another restraining order. Now she had to keep 5 miles from the wagon train, and she wasn't having any of it. But neither was Heritage Gateways. As she followed the train over the South Pass, the sheriff was waiting with a warrant for her arrest. It seemed as if Delane St. John's reenactment journey was over.
You have a 1 year...
Delane is being held in a detention center in Lander. She's not been charged and bail has not been set, but she's been fingerprinted and photographed in prison overalls. Does it shake her faith?
I think people know that the church is an outstanding religion, and the people are very good, but we're just like anybody else. There's people there in our religion, and the ones especially that is in charge of this train that have not been truthful and have not kept their word. And I think especially those who want a little greed and power, that has come into it, and that will reflect badly.
And does she blame the church?
Absolutely not. I know that the church is true, and I have a firm testimony of it. This is just a plight for our ancestors and our way of honoring them, that I promised my children that we would do this, and I do not hope that the church is...
In The Gathering of Zion, Wallace Stegner wrote of the early pioneers: suffering, endurance, discipline, faith, brotherly and sisterly charity, the qualities so thoroughly celebrated by Mormon writers, were surely well distributed. But theirs was also a normal amount of human cussedness, vengefulness, masochism, selfishness, and gullibility. Delane's mother and the 2 kids wait for news 5 miles from the train. On July the 1st, the wagon train entered Farson to set up camp for the next few days. It was time for a well-earned break from the psychological and physical rigors of the trail. for essential repairs, to visit the laundromat, and of course to sample Fasten's famous big cone. Pam held back, but Gordon went for the big one, which in America means big.
I mean, we should have been getting salads. Oh, we've been craving salad, you know. Let's see how
hot dogs, let's go! Hot dogs and ice cream. True American.
Nestling among the handcarts and wagons is a living history group on a mission from the church. They're dedicated Mormon families trained in Salt Lake City to live on the trail as recorded in the journals of their ancestors. They're scheduled onto the train once a week, so no big cone for them.
It's something we do to get into the feel and the spirit of it, to feel how they felt. And we've come to realize that there was a purpose for everything they did, and the clothing they wore, the aprons, the way they had this flap here. When, you know, they got too dirty, they would just let it down and it would cover the dirtiest part of the apron. All the petticoats they wore, they had a reason for it. It kept them, kept it so that they could walk. If you only wear one, it trips you. It just kind of tangles around the legs, and they'd wear up to 7. Since this is a layover day, we've been doing laundry, taking care of these boys that need their hair cut, taking care of just those little details, mending, washing, doctoring those poor blisters on the feet.
A lot better, but still not right. I don't think they'll be right until I stop walking to the valley. But never mind. How's Kirsty?
Early pioneer journals mostly detail the day-to-day routine of the trail, how far they'd gone, landmarks they'd passed. But faith, suffering, and sacrifice are the legacy of the Mormon Trail, and that missionary message is beginning to irritate at least one heathen.
Most of the journals that you hear about on the train are talking about the Mormons that had a hard time. Evidently, none of them had good times. So, you know, there was over 80,000 of them crossed on the prairie, and, you know, if you added all of it up, there's probably maybe 1,500 out of that 80,000 that really had bad times. The rest of them had good times. I was reading an account of one guy that made the crossing 17 times. Now, you know that guy must have been having a good time, or he wouldn't have made so many trips, would he? You know, 17 trips from winter quarters to Salt Lake City is a pretty good journey. You know, he had a good time, I'm sure. But I don't think he had a journal. Maybe he didn't want to report all he was doing, you know.
On the eve of July the 4th, fed, washed, and rested, the pioneers gradually joined with the locals in celebrating the eve of Independence Day. Since Mormons don't smoke, drink, or take coffee or tea, they seemed reluctant at first to join in the festivities with their heathen hosts. But once the band struck up, there was no stopping them.
Don't you wish you could do this in England?
Worried about the bad influence of Gentiles on his wagon train, Brigham Young had harangued the saints for succumbing to a mean, low, groveling, covetous spirit. I have let the brethren dance and fiddle and act the nigger night after night to see what they will do. If they set up their heads and seek to introduce iniquity into this camp and to trample on the priesthood, I swear to them they shall never go back to tell the tale.
Rock and roll, here we go now.
As the wagon train moved into the home state of Utah, the pilgrims were facing the most difficult terrain of the journey. There are nearly 70 wagons now, and well over 150 horseback riders and countless walkers, all enthusiastic and all greenhorns.
We appreciate you people. We're glad you're here. But if you can't follow the rules, load your animal and get out. If you're not an outrider...
Bob Lowe is the Utah wagon master, and he's under a lot of pressure to get the wagon train to Salt Lake City on time and intact.
And we're looking at 2 outriders per wagon, not a whole family. Now, we want that clear. And if you're not an outrider, stay to the back. Thank you.
Here, you need to be sure you've got everything packed in your cars and ready to go when you leave.
Mormons and day trippers from all over the state have descended on the train like locusts, eager to sign up for a day or two, or just sit on the wagon and be part of the experience for a few hours.
We will be able to have our vehicles there tomorrow.
Yes.
They seek out the authentics and the all-the-wayers. The pilgrims listen patiently to the same old questions, like goldfish in a bowl, unable to escape the attention.
I would not have personally chosen this campsite. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I'm just curious.
I would have camped down in Mormon Flats with the rest of the pioneers.
We look back longingly at Nebraska because we were smaller then, and it was more intimate. It was more a family, you know. We knew all the people who were going all the way, and it was just us, and we all helped each other. But now you're getting more and more people who are coming, you know, just for a day or two, which is nice for them and nice in a way because you meet a lot of interesting people. But you lose that family feel, you know, that togetherness. So, yes, I'm looking forward to the end now. I'm trail weary.
Delane St. John had been released from jail in Wyoming, but never rejoined the wagon train. She just carried on walking with a friend all the way to Salt Lake City and arrived a few days ahead of the train. Although she was jubilant, her arrival went unnoticed. Brigham Young had successfully led the early pioneers along 1,000 miles of trail. And now they were faced with their last test of faith. The Rocky Mountains. The pioneers had to carve a trail through this granite fortress. Today, it's a reminder that driving a wagon requires great skill to do it right, and that it can be downright dangerous if it goes wrong. Miraculously, no one is killed, but they're in shock, badly bruised, and the wagon is a write-off. It's a stark and final reminder of their pioneer legacy. Ahead lay the crest of Big Mountain, and after a 3-month journey, the pilgrims began the final ascent, firmly focused on the mission they'd undertaken. For Gordon and Pam, like the English pilgrims before them, their first view of the valley and Zion.
I made a promise that I was going to walk all the way into the valley carrying my nation's flag. Now, I really meant that. There was no idle promise that I was making to myself. It was a commitment because it represented my country, it represented the early British saints. And I took upon myself that commitment. And in taking it upon myself, then I was very much certain that I was going to see it through. And I really do mean that. Where my nation's flag go, I go. Where I go, my nation's flag goes. Yeah, no doubt about it. It'll go into the valley.
Here, fantastic, wonderful view of the valley. Not such a hard climb as expected. Feet feel wonderful. Everything's great.
We're rolling, here we go!
This truly American religion believes that Christ visited America, that Joseph Smith was the prophet, and the Mormons were the chosen people, and their mission was to restore his gospel. It believes in Masonic-like rituals, speaking in tongues, divine revelation, and that through prayer and the laying on of hands, they can perform miracles. Whatever their experience of the trail, the church was going to let them know they loved them for what they'd achieved. When Brigham Young was taken to see this valley, he said, "This is the place."